Hi.
We're honored to have Mr. Ricky Gill, candidate for the 9th Congressional District, and it's going to. Well, actually, I get to introduce Colin Hunter, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Oh, all right. You're on the spot. I'm right in the middle, too. Well, I work for Ricky's campaign, but maybe more importantly, I'm a good friend of his, and we go back a ways. And that's why I'm involved in all this. Ricky's a great guy. He's running for the 9th Congressional District, which is Lodi, Stockton, Gulf, goes out to the west to Brentwood, Discovery Bay, those areas. And it's a competitive district. Ricky's running against Jerry McNerney, who's a three-term Democratic incumbent. Ricky's got a lot of great press so far. He's been on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle. He's been in the New York Times. Has outraised Jerry McNerney, which is a very positive sign of the National Republican Congressional Committee has put Ricky in its kind of star candidate program, which is called Young Guns. So he's in the Young Guns program, and they're lending their support to his campaign. But perhaps most importantly, Ricky's a guy with strong local roots. He's been involved in his family's small business here for a long time. That's everything from farming to running an RV park. And Ricky served, when he was in high school, actually, by Governor Schwarzenegger, he served by the state senate to serve on the State Board of Education. And you can talk a little bit more about what he did there, but the point being, Ricky's got a great background, not only in his community, but in the state. And things are going very well so far. So without further ado, let me introduce your next Congressman, Ricky Gill.
Colin, thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone for coming. I guess it's going to be free form tonight. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank in particular the person who posted this invitation publicly for a variety of reasons. Not only did you give yourself a good press, I hope, but you helped me elude my Democratic trackers. I was telling folks earlier that my office should pay someone to follow me around, and they think we're at BJ's and not UJ's tonight. So great job, whoever did that. Eve, it was you. Congratulations. Job well done. In fact, to Tony and Eve, this is the second time they're hearing me speak, so I must have been double trouble. A lot of folks ask me why I'm running for Congress. I think it's a simple explanation. If you look at this district today, we have a lot of economic hardship. I often come across a lot of young people who are, either in their 20s or they're finishing high school, and they say, Ricky, here's the difficulty I'm facing. I'm not sure I should stay in high school because I have to supplement my father's income. We're not making enough to meet our ends meet. Or to pay the bills. There are a lot of young people who can't come back to this economy because it's broken. We have a double the national unemployment rate. You're seeing in the presidential campaign that's an issue. 8% unemployment, 9%. It's twice as bad. And the hardship is enormous. We have a foreclosure rate that's about 8%, second only to Las Vegas. We have huge issues. And yet in this district today, the real problem is not only economic, it's political. We don't have a single state or federal legislator who lives in this district today, not one. I know we have a guest here from Brentwood. I'm originally from the Lodi, Stockton area. In all the corners of this district, in the four corners, there's not one legislator who lives here. And so we are underrepresented beyond belief. To not have a voice in the process was unacceptable, and that's why we stepped up to address this issue. I'll tell you, that leadership vacuum has a profound consequence on this community. When I mentioned not a single legislator, that includes Jerry McNerney. I think there's a long track record, not of success, but of broken promises. When my opponent got elected, he promised to rectify this economic situation, focus on economic reform. Well, what he did is he set up a blue ribbon panel, and it never met. We have a foreclosure rate that's sky high. He promised to address this issue, and yet all he's done is hold a workshop, I think at Delta College. He promised to focus on agriculture. And yet he sold us out on free trade agreements that would have added economic activity here. That's our biggest industry. We grow grapes and walnuts and asparagus and cherries. And he sold us out. He voted against one of the few issues that President Obama and House Republicans agree on, free trade. He sold us out and voted against it. You look at other issues like school reform. My opponent has done nothing on our high school dropout crisis, which is in our backyard and really crippling this community. His focus has really been on the East Bay. Maybe we shouldn't blame him for that, but those are his roots, and that's where he's from. What I think we bring to this race is a depth and breadth of vision, commitment to this community. And I think this audience in particular is special to me because I share an immigrant story with many of you in this room. You know, I'm a first-generation American. There's a lot that doesn't meet the eye always, but you know, I got an interesting story too. My mother and father settled in this community for all the right reasons, I think. Theirs was an immigrant story that defines this country and what we can be proud of. My father settled here because he wanted to practice medicine and be a farmer. It was a simple dream, a simple notion he had. And it came to fulfillment here in the Central Valley. What I often tell people is that as a party, we have to get back to the business of abundant stereotypes. You know, there is a nasty stereotype about the Republican Party that we are somehow narrow-minded, not focused on the future, that we're exclusive and not committed to a big tent. Well, we got to change that. And you know, the Latina Republican, I think, should be on the forefront of this. We can be a party of ideas, of bold ideas. We don't just have to say no, we can have an affirmative plan. Here's what I mean by that. Let's talk about equity and civil rights in the context of public education. We're failing a whole generation of students. I fought this fight on the State Board of Education, I want you to know. I was on the State Board of Education. We fought for our high school exit exam. We kept high standards in place. We got to make sure education reform is student-centered. Let's have that conversation. We can beat the Democrats to the punch. No one should have a monopoly on our kids' future. And if there's an interest group that matters in education, it's students, not the other interest groups. I mean, think about it. You go to Sacramento, every other interest group in public education pays millions of dollars to have a seat at the table. But the students only have one voice. That was the student membership on the State Board of Education. That's a role I had. We got to make sure that students are the center of what we do in education. On health care, President Obama has, you know, passed this massive overhaul of health care that has not reduced costs. Sure, we should reject that. But let's talk about patient-centered health reform, health savings accounts, so that individuals and entrepreneurs can do what's right for their business with the same costs. People can take care of themselves, and we don't have this bloated bureaucracy making decisions for patients and physicians. Let's support a balanced budget requirement so that generations unborn and young ones like the young one to my left aren't drowning in debt. Let's have that kind of sympathy. That's the rhetoric we should have. Let's be the party that actually tries to constrain government. We don't want to just hear these catchphrases of limited government. Here are my ideas. I mean, let's be the party of the sunset movement, so that when Ronald Reagan said the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a federal program, let's fight against that. Let's put term limits on these federal programs so that we revisit what's working and what's not. Let's support a line item veto. If Congress can't discipline the budget process, the president should be able to strike what's working and what's not. So these are the issues that I'm advocating in this campaign. It's a back to basics approach. But I think if you listen to people in this district, if you feel their pain, as I do, if you're on the ground, as I do, we have boots on the ground, you'll know that our voice has been missing in this process. To have a congressman who's in the Bay Area is to neglect this community. And moreover, there is some late-breaking news that I think confirms and kind of corroborates that something is just afoot. You know, and it's a big issue because it goes to trust. Everywhere you go in this country, people are upset, but they're also feeling like there's no trust in the political system. We can't trust our leaders anymore. And you know, my opponent's fallen into that trap too. I told you he neglected our farmers here. He's so worried about those windmills and alternative energy in the East Bay, he was willing to take a $5,000 contribution from Solyndra and then turn the other cheek, you know, turn the other way when they committed taxpayer fraud. I mean, that's pay to play that we have to get rid of. You look at him trying to, and I was talking to Triana Berryhill about this, he paid a lobbyist $20,000 to corrupt the redistricting commission. He's manipulating a district where he doesn't even live. So politics has definitely become a race to the bottom in our community, and that's something we got to kick. Tony Amador is here. Tony's making a sacrifice in his particular campaign. I know the Berryhill certainly are. It's a tough thing to do. What I would say is that if you've got joy in your heart, a vision, a clear conscience, you can make a difference. I have to believe that. You know, my campaign was an improbable journey. I remember when I announced, there were certainly some people who were skeptics who said, is this going to work? And yet we've come a long way in those 8 months. You know, yesterday I just had the privilege of standing side by side with former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. He campaigned for me, and Jeb was excited to support me. And Jeb is a national Republican leader who knows the importance of building this party, particularly in the Hispanic community. And we can do that. We can go on offense. In a district like this, we can make a statement that we're Republicans don't have to play defense. We can actually make a difference. This is an opportunity for us to stand up for ourselves. This is about the dignity of our community. So with that, I'd like to close by saying thanks so much. I know you are more focused on your food as you should be. I seem to have neglected dinner tonight, but I think that's okay. I gotta stay in this. I gotta stay in these suits, right? I'll take some questions if you don't mind, and hope I give you a primer on my race. But we do have a path to victory.
One comment, I heard you on KSFO yesterday, and I was going to try and call in, they weren't going to take any calls. A lot of people don't know that KSFO has dropped Rush Limbaugh in favor of J.D. Hayworth, the former U.S. Congressman from Arizona, ran against the next game a couple years ago, which lost. But when J.D. Hayworth came here, he stated he is here to change the face of politics in Northern California. So I think he should be on your side. He probably will be on your side. He wants to end the corruption and the good old boy stuff. Particularly says he's going to go after Nancy Pelosi. Well, if you go after Nancy Pelosi, you can break the chain of Jerry McNerney and probably John Garamendi to our east, the west. So, you know, I think that'd be a great asset to you, stay in contact with him. Getting down here on a Saturday or the barbecues in July or something like that, to have the community meet him. He's a great speaker, and I listened to him a long time on the radio. He doesn't have a Wi-Fi radio. He gets around. But that should be a big difference. KSFO made a difference back in '94 when they changed the format, when the Republicans swept into the House. They made a big difference in North Carolina.
No, he was very kind to me. I think I may have, Tom, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was one of his first guests, so.
It was his first show, I think, right?
First show, yeah, so,
No, he's been on a week.
okay. But it was a baptism by fire for both of us, you know.
By the way, did you notice something about Jeb Bush?
I noticed a
He should have been
lot.
a prize fighter because his hand was enormous. I met him in Iraq. You know, swallowed my hand.
No, he made me look small.
Yes,
Physically,
big man.
so. But he's got a big heart too. I mean, what came across from him is, you know, our party, we get a bad rep. We really do. And then we sometimes make the unfortunate mistake of playing into those stereotypes. And I think what Jeb sees in our campaign is the ability to transcend that divide, to go to folks and say, you don't have to vote Democrat by default. I mean, listen to us. We were 5 minutes ago talking to equity language on public education, on tax reform, on balanced budgets. This is stuff that we should rally around because it matters to the next generation. And if we're that party that cares for the little guy, we're winning more votes than we were last election. That's what we have to do. Come on, don't be shy. Yeah.
What's your take on organizations like the EPA and funneling money into all these smart growth and sustainable development projects?
Well, let me talk to you about my personal background, and then we'll shift into the larger policy. You know, so my background is in a family small business that is largely agriculture, and there was a big fight we had in this community 5-6 years ago around the green belt. I don't know if you remember that. But it was all about property rights versus a big government trying to trample on farmers. And you know, I actually live between in this Lodi-Stockton corridor, and if anyone knows how to keep land green, it's farmers. You know, and so there were these, you know, the cities of Lodi and Stockton were kind of in cahoots in these smart growth initiatives, and I felt like that stepped on the toes of farmers who really already have a lot that's being put upon them. I told you about McNerney on trade and all this hyper-regulation. So I want you to know I'd be an advocate of the farmer and the property owner. That's the essence of our society, is private property, right? That's why society exists in the first case. In terms of the EPA, I think the regulatory state's got out of control. You know, you hear a lot of liberals talk about, I'm going to dig you into the weeds here, so I'm sorry, but you hear a lot of liberals talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy, like when the economy's down, you got to spend more, it's counter-cyclical policy. Well, we should have the same thing on regulation. If the economy's down, we shouldn't have more red tape flowing out of the federal government. That's what we've had, more and more red tape. Here are my reforms. And actually, Jerry McNerney just voted against one of them, so it's another distinction in our race. Every regulation that comes from the federal government that affects the economy more than $100 million, I think the Congress has to approve. The Congress should have an up or down floor vote. They should have the discretion of approving that before the agency rule takes final effect. It's called the Reins Act, and McNerney and a bunch of big government folks voted against it. Not because he even read it. I'm sure Nancy Pelosi probably told him what to do. Another example of that is I think agencies, when they're articulating rules, they should have to look at the cost-benefit analysis in terms of how many jobs are going to be lost with this additional rule. Job loss should be considered one of those costs. Right now, it's not. I would fight for that kind of goal if I were in Congress. Again, this is an issue that matters a lot to the fabric of our society, and our opponent is, my opponent's really not doing anything on this issue. In fact, Colin is and I got to thank Colin, he's a former CIA guy. I think he downgraded his role to step on my campaign, but Colin's job is to sometimes send media clips around. And I'm thinking about our economy and how high our unemployment rate is. And my opponent, I think this week was, he felt the need to, if I'm not mistaken, Colin, teach seniors how to play Sudoku in Pleasanton. I mean, that's kind of what he was busy doing. And yet we have people here who can't even make their ends meet. We have huge issues. So this is a conversation we need to be having. Everything from regulation to taxes and public education.
Okay, so you were discussing that issue of wanting to double the number. My question is, there's actually a few people that I have, myself, I just graduated from college last year. Now, our issue is we would have to go over the hill or go to the area and stuff to get a good decent air value. Whereas here, nobody's hiring. How would you go about effectively trying to encourage more people to hire?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. One of my big initiatives, and I'm working on this now, is to forge some sort of a bond between Silicon Valley and Central Valley. I mean, Silicon Valley is booming now. Look at the balance sheets of some of these companies. They're doing great, and yet their expansion is not here. Think about it. If you read the newspapers, read Forbes, their expansion is in Oregon, it's in Idaho, it's in Iowa. Why not here? So I think if we had a congressman who actually had some substance who was on this issue like nothing else, we could build that corridor development between Silicon Valley and Central Valley. The second thing is we have to harness our agriculture industry. That means opening up foreign markets. We have to open up these trading opportunities. We have to undercut the regulations that are getting in the way. I think whenever you have the federal government spending the way it is, it's a zero-sum game. You have them taking money that small business would be taking. I mean, you have the federal government competing with small business for capital. And that makes it harder for a small business to meet and expand payroll. So these are all those issues that we're talking about. And so we're having this discussion, and I'm not sure where my opponent stands on. I suspect he's adverse to everything that he said. Yeah, Alex.
I received a letter today because I voiced concern to Congressman McNerney regarding the Reins Act, HR 10. And I circulated it to a lot of people in the district, within the district, and he sent a letter to me today. But in the letter, he didn't tell his position. And this is the type of guy that doesn't. No, I'm serious. He didn't say that I voted.
He voted no on it.
Yeah, he voted no against it. But in the letter, he says, yeah, there's some people that are for it, and this is why, and this is, and against. But and thank you for calling in and expressing your views. But he doesn't tell me the truth as a constituent how he voted. I have to go on the computer and search engine to find out his vote.
Yeah. Well, that's very problematic.
Yeah, it is problematic because he's just hiding his attention. And another issue is regarding.
Can I see that letter, or you can get it? I just would.
Yeah, I have it at home. It's just amazing what this guy is all about. Regarding oil and gas, are you willing to open up our open up our lands to start drilling? Because North Dakota has a big boom out there, and you're talking about jobs. I mean, I have a friend in Fargo, and he's like, heck, anyone comes to North Dakota, you find a job there very quick.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, McDonald's out there, they can't find people to work at.
Sure.
So, I mean, how can we address that issue on a federal level? States,
We need to do it all on energy. I'm a big believer in that, and I think you're seeing. Are any of you following this pipeline debate? Basically, Canada came to us and they implored us to construct this pipeline. It was a net positive for our country. And yet the president refuses to let this pipeline be constructed, which would have created jobs up and down this corridor from the Dakotas down to Texas. And it's because I think the environmental lobby calls the shots in this White House. And they also call the shots with our member of Congress. Look, I think my opponent started with great intentions. I wouldn't dispute that. There are a lot of people in this room who, when he first got elected, said, let's give this guy a chance. I actually was one of them. I was willing to give him a chance. But if you look at his website, this is the benefit of having a CIA guy on your staff. There's a Wayback Machine so you can log everything on the internet. Well, you look at his website in 2006, and Alex, this would be instructive for you too, and you look at his recent votes, and you see a complete contradiction. You see, oh, we need to expand access to foreign markets for our agriculture products, and then you see him voting against trade for South Korea, Colombia, and Panama. You see him talking about, and there are several examples, you see him talking about balanced budgets, yet he votes against a balanced budget requirement. So there's a lot of hypocrisy, and it gets back to trust. And I think the straw that really broke the camel's back is this redistricting issue. That process belonged to the people. It did not belong to politicians. You know, the point was for politicians to take their hands off. And yet I can produce for you a $20,000 invoice to my opponent paying a consultant. I mean, if that's what best we've got, and this is him manipulating a district where he doesn't live, it's got to strike a chord with voters here that our self-esteem is being wounded by this guy. And no candidate should pretend to be perfect, but we can do a lot better than that.
I read an article that this should be alarming. Like, for example, the federal government, this is how bad it's getting, is that they've seized 1 million acres surrounding Grand Canyon. Yep. They banned it for mining. So it's like, it's going on everywhere on a federal level. So I don't know if you've heard about it, but that should be alarming for a lot of people.
And like I said, I think the basic principle here is we need to be doing it all, and these kind of arbitrary parameters have not advanced a smart energy policy. It's something Governor Bush yesterday called a patriotic energy policy. It's back to energy independence. And there are things we can just rally around as a country, but this is one of them. Again, the quote, yeah.
Well, are there any more questions?
I want to ask on the water issue.
Okay, yeah.
You know, although we see people down in Hanford area and stuff with their dust bowl, yet they're trying to build a crucial canal here and other things. How do you see the water issues from a congressional level?
Well, I see the water issues this way. Coming from the perspective of someone where being on a farm and being in agriculture, that's what pays the bill for my family, frankly. I will tell you that I see water issues through the prism of what's good for family farmers here. And the Peripheral Canal is something that is anathema to this district. UOP, you don't have to take my word for it. UOP just released a study where if this Peripheral Canal is built, not only will it amount to the greatest transfer of wealth in this state, but it also will kill 13,000 jobs overnight.
Yeah.
Now think about it. I guess I have Eve, if you'll give me 1 minute.
We have one more question back there.
There's one short story I want to tell you, and then there's a policy point. Jerry McNerney, for the past 4 or 5 years, has technically represented this part of Stockton, part of San Joaquin County in Congress. And yet it took him 5 years to get on the House floor and denounce the Peripheral Canal. The one thing that's going to drive a stake through our heart as a community. It took him 5 years to do that. That's being missing in action. The second thing is I got a call from a good friend of mine. I won't reveal his identity. He's a Stockton attorney. And he said, hey, Ricky, this is 5 months ago. He said, I got a call from your opponent, Jerry McNerney. I said, that's interesting. Fill in the blank, won't tell you his name. He said, that's interesting. You've never met him before, have you? He said, no, I'm not sure he could pick me out of the lineup. I said, well, what do you want to talk to me about? He said, well, I want to talk to you about water rights. So I said, okay. I said, well, how did he get your information? He said, well, he didn't know how to call me. He called up a San Francisco lawyer and said, hey, I need help in Stockton on water rights. Who's an attorney I can call? And this guy's been in Congress for 5 years representing Stockton. He doesn't know a lawyer here he can call on water rights? I mean, how abused are we going to get as a community? So anyway, this is going to be a wake-up call. We're going to provide not just an accountability test. We're going to win this thing. That's going to start with you folks believing. We have a question from a young person.
I'm only 21 years old, and I'm starting to realize more into politicians and everything because I want to be informed about all of them. And honestly, I'm really young, so Social Security is pretty much a big issue for the future. for, older persons, retires, they're covered pretty much, but me, I'm
Oh,
young.
wait just a minute, okay? That isn't totally true.
Oh, well, at least they're covered more than us, we're taxpayers and everything, and we're putting into Social Security, but I feel like, for the future, we gotta be worried. So what would you do to reform Social Security?
Yeah. Well, I mean, entitlements are a big discussion that needs to happen, and I don't think we should be penalizing people for having this discussion. I think my opponent's approach is to put his head in the sand and demagogue the issue. I think what we have to do is understand that reform is actually saving these programs, right? There are a couple of things we could do, whether it's potentially age requirements. It's also means testing these programs. There are some people for whom these programs matter more than others.
Yeah.
So means testing is an approach. On Medicare, I think it's maybe more competition. We have to empower patients. Right now, the president's approach to reforming Medicare is something that violates the patient-physician relationship. It's you have 15 unelected bureaucrats telling a doctor what test he can order for a Medicare patient. And I actually my mother and father are doctors. I know they would rebel against that idea. They don't want a person who didn't go to medical school telling them what they can order for their patient. That's not right. So there has to be smart entitlement reform. This is exactly why young people can be voting Republican more often than they do. Because if we're the party of balanced budgets and responsibility, young people who want to be hit can actually be Republicans. And I'll tell you, if there's a home in a campaign, it's going to be in a campaign like mine. I'm turning 25 this year, so you mentioned being young, and I guess I'm a senior citizen relative to you. But look, and my opponent likes to demagogue my age. He likes to equate to inexperience, but I think that's a faulty premise. I'm a young guy, but served on the State Board of Education, and unlike my opponent, know what it's like to create a job in this community. Not only do I have the experience of living here, but agriculture and small business is important, and we know those pressures. I know those pressures.
I have just two quick comments, actually 2.5. One is I really admire the fact that you've been able to maneuver through all of the eating and the waitress coming in and going out. My congratulations, because you've done very well there. The second one is, would you kind of use a different word than entitlements? Because those of us who are receiving Social Security now, we paid it.
Yeah.
We paid it for an awful lot of years, okay? So it isn't an entitlement. It's something that we have already paid for.
Sure.
So find another word.
Yep.
Find another word to be able to define that. And the third comment that I have is, I have a great deal of respect for Jeb Bush. I find him not only attractive, but I also find him very, very bright. And you can't be a brighter person, a brighter man, than to marry a Mexican woman.
I guess you give me advice since I'm unmarried, right?
I made her, but, well, you need to listen more to Al Bundy.
Yeah, I think that wraps it up.
Thank you so much. Here, a little gift for you. It says Latinas United Republican Women Federated, with our post office box, in case you want to send us something.
Send your contribution. Getting the hook from this guy too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
We expect you to have federated women on your staff when elected.
You got it.
Is everybody doing okay? How's your food? Good. Did everyone order?
Yeah.
Did you order, Judy?